oh my God, my parents' love is conditional. That's where this anxiety is coming from. My relationship with my parents is built on a threat. And I don't want to say that out loud. They shunned me overnight. I lost my parents overnight. Jehovah's Witnesses made everything more complicated. And because of them, that is why I don't have a relationship with my parents today. And I haven't spoken to them or heard their voice in 8 years. You are a Jehovah's Witness and nothing else. Your devotion and loyalty only lies with the organization. It doesn't matter what else you want in life. Jehovah's Witnesses are a very isolationist, insular community. Everybody on the outside is either a dangerous influence or beneath you. They need to be saved. Okay, it's the truth. I am so lucky to have been born into the one chosen group.
I know that one.
So it's a heavy burden and obligation. I think there's a mechanism that was in me that said something's off, something's wrong. And that's why there was this brewing resentment. People don't realize the degree of psychological abuse, coercion, and manipulation that's happening to good, just everyday people that you go to school with and work with. The systematic brainwashing and desensitizing and how they strip you of your humanity. The outside world doesn't know about that. I reached the conclusion that I was in fact trapped. This building, this religion, this organization stole my life and I'm reclaiming it.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey guys, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. As always, if you're only listening and you want to see our faces, YouTube is the blessed place. It's a blessed place over on YouTube. Best place to go, so you can join in on the conversation. Leaving those words of encouragement for our guests means so much to them and to us. It's the best way to support the show and our guests, boost the algorithm. Even leaving an emoji is extremely helpful. So today's guest, we reached out to you guys, our audience, and we were like, hey, who's your favorite ex-J-Dub? Let's have a conversation. We got so many responses. So thank you guys for being active on our community posts. It helps so much when we can get your opinions. We got a lot for Owen Morgan, who we have interviewed, and we did do a follow-up. I don't know when we're releasing these, but we did interview him. And we got a lot for Stop the Shunning, Bethany, over on her channel. And I was like, who is this girl? So I went to her channel, checked it out. I was so happy to see a female in this space because there aren't many with the Jehovah's Witnesses. So thank you so much for joining us, Bethany.
Thank you, Shalise, for having me on. It's truly an honor to be on Cults to Consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're doing some great work over on your channel, and we'll definitely send everyone over there to check it out. Everything with Jehovah's Witnesses, your experiences, the things that are going on, some of the scandals, which will play into this video today. I know we're going to kind of do an amalgamation of your story and some of the issues that are currently happening within the church and some of the ways that the psychological brainwashing can break you down in this. It's one of those mental psychological cults, I feel like. Same with Mormonism. They're very similar. Anytime I do a video with the Jehovah's Witness, I'm like, me too, because it feels very much alike. And they can seem very fine on the outside. They're just going about their business. They're knocking on your door. They're sweet. Everyone looks kind of normal and happy and fine. But when you really get into the rules, the regulations, the type of expectations they have placed on you, the fear, all of that really builds up under the surface. And that's why I think it's a psychological cult, same as Mormonism. So all of that to say, what do you think about that description there?
No, you nailed it. Jehovah's Witnesses, I've said this before, I've been saying this a lot recently, that Jehovah's Witnesses, if people took the Jehovah's Witnesses as seriously as they did Jonestown or Nexium or Scientology, these sort of headline grabby cults, they would be far less likely to brush them off as dusty old codgers in bad suits knocking on your door on Saturday morning. And so they don't look threatening. They're easy to laugh at. They don't look scary. And so kind of like what you talked about a little bit in the beginning is that it's this it's so insidious. It looks normal. They live among you. It's, when we think of cults, it kind of conjures up images of either somebody who lived on a compound or underground, or there's some strange guru in someone's backyard chanting and sacrificing babies or something crazy. You hear these crazy traumatic stories, but Jehovah's Witnesses are everywhere, and people don't realize the degree of psychological abuse, coercion, and manipulation that's happening to good, just everyday people that you go to school with and work with. So yeah, that's a very apt description. You nailed it kind of right out the gate.
I feel like yours was much more concise. Non-threatening is the word I was looking for, so thank you for that. They seem very just non-threatening on the surface, and there's a lot lurking underneath. So we're going to dive into that more through your story. Let's talk a little bit about your specific childhood and the expectations and rules within your family.
So I was born into a Jehovah's Witness family, very devout parents. My father, he was, so to give you a little bit of background, my father, he came from a smaller family, and but they were all Jehovah's Witnesses, even though it was a smaller family. My mother's side of the family was much larger, and 99% of them were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And how my parents met was that my father, at 18 years old, this sheltered young man, moved to Brooklyn, to the headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses, because at the time, back in the 60s, when he moved there in 1968 to Brooklyn, he went to be a volunteer. He was this sheltered young man from El Paso, Texas, and he went to go volunteer at the headquarters for 4 years. It's very much like the military. It's a very strict environment at the headquarters. Now they're located in upstate New York. But at the time, this was the 60s, and my mother's from Aruba. She's one of 7 kids, and the family immigrated to Brooklyn in the 60s, and the family were devout Jehovah's Witnesses. That changed, but at the time, her father was very devout and was raising the family as witnesses. Long story short, they met in New York, in Brooklyn. My father was stationed when he was volunteering at the headquarters. He ended up being assigned. It's again like almost like the military, being assigned or stationed at my mother's congregation in Brooklyn. And so my dad was like this kind of sheltered Texas young man. And then my mom was kind of like, she's Dutch, she's from Aruba, but grew up in Brooklyn. So she was sort of like this spicy Brooklyn chick. They get together, and then they end up eventually settling in Dallas, Texas. And I was born in the 80s in Dallas, Texas. And so I grew up in a devout Jehovah's Witness household. There's 2 types of Jehovah's Witnesses. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There's the true blue believer who really believes it, they internalize it, they truly believe the doctrine, and they're really into it. There's more, or I should say there's really strict families. My parents were not, they were devout, but they were not super strict. So Jehovah's Witnesses are a very isolationist, very insular community. Everybody on the outside is dangerous, is either a dangerous influence or beneath you. They need to be saved. They're called worldly people, and worldly within the Jehovah's Witnesses is a slur. So in the real world, Shalice, if you call somebody worldly, it's like, oh, well, they're sophisticated or educated, or they traveled, or they have some kind of experience. They're worldly. But in the Jehovah's Witnesses, when you call someone worldly, that's a non-Jehovah's Witness, and they're potentially dangerous.
Oh yeah, I get it. When you say worldly, my Mormon programming kicked in, and I knew what that meant, because they will always say, "You live in the world, but you're not of the world."
Nailed it. Yes. They say you live in the world, but you are no part of the world. That's what Jehovah's
Mhm.
Witnesses heard. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though I was raised in a devout Jehovah's Witness household, my parents were fairly balanced, but there's more to say about that. They were fairly balanced, but they still followed the rules. People looked up to them in the congregation. We were a solid family, but I had an outside reference point. So I had my mother's worldly, I had my aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody on my mom's side that I could look to, who grew up on the mean streets of Brooklyn, and I could observe their behavior and see outsiders. And then I grew up in public school, K through 12. Went to college. That's another part of the story. That's a big no-no in the Jehovah's Witnesses. You're not supposed to pursue higher education. So just that's basically the groundwork. I grew up we seem normal, like you mentioned in the beginning. We seem like a normal family. And honestly, I'll say this now. My parents, if you plucked the organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower organization out of the equation, I had decent, loving, normal parents. Like I'd still have like a normal relationship with my parents today. Every family has its stuff, but the organization absolutely complicated everything and made my life and our relationships far more strained and unnatural and bizarre based on their doctrine, their theology, their ideology. Jehovah's Witnesses made everything more complicated. And because of them, that is why I don't have a relationship with my parents today. And I haven't spoken to them or heard their voice in 8 years.
Wow. Can you describe for someone who's not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, in a nutshell, what does the religion focus on and what are their main points?
So the core beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe they are the one true religion. Everyone else is wrong. This isn't like, we're part of mainstream Christianity, or just if you believe in Jesus, that's great. It's not like that. They believe they call themselves the truth with a capital T. They have the truth. They have the one correct interpretation of scripture. They're true Christians. And everyone else is wrong and doomed if they don't convert to being a Jehovah's Witness. They don't believe in people going to heaven except for a very select number that they plucked out of the book of Revelation. They believe 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses go to heaven. Okay, but they believe that most of humanity, if you make it through Armageddon and you pass through Judgment Day and you're deemed a good Jehovah's Witness or whatever, they believe everybody's going to live on a paradise earth, a utopia. And it's these nice ideas. No more sickness, pain, death. These are wonderful things objectively. As human beings, we want justice and equality and no more suffering. So they appeal to people that way, but you don't know the culture of the organization behind the four walls of the Kingdom Hall, who they are as a culture, as a community. You see one thing written in their literature, and you see them knocking on doors, and like we've said since the beginning, they seem normal or whatever, just harmless, quirky, sincere religious group. But it's not until you leaf through that literature and see what they really actually believe and how the systematic brainwashing and desensitizing and how they strip you of your humanity and how they separate families. The outside world doesn't know about that. And that's why I've been so vocal. But those are the core beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They believe people are going to live in a paradise earth, and that if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, you're screwed. You're going to be destroyed. Every other religion is going to be destroyed, and the world's just going to be full of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the bottom line. They don't celebrate birthdays. They don't celebrate Christmas, no holidays, anything like that. Nothing that gives you, puts the spotlight on you, no personal achievements. It's satanic, or you can't demonstrate independent thinking or critical thinking, and you cannot criticize the leadership. So again, you see one thing that's like a very shiny, glossy PR front. If you look at their website, jw.org, it looks like Steve Jobs gave it a facelift. It looks like a Mac store. Like they're on top of their game now with their apps and their literature, and everything looks copacetic. But unless you grew up in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you experienced something very different than what they're presenting to the public. And one more thing I'd like to say is that I do not have a beef with individual Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses as individuals. On balance, they're good people. They're just trapped. They've been indoctrinated from birth. I have a problem with the leadership. I have a problem with the governing body, the centralized leadership that's based in upstate New York, because they're the ones that make the rules. And that power trickles down to all the congregations throughout the world, and then it affects the rank and file. It affects the everyday Jehovah's Witness. So I want to make that clear right now at the outset of this interview that I don't have anything personal against the everyday Jehovah's Witness. I feel sorry for them. I used to be one of them. I'm speaking up because I believe that the leadership is abusing and exploiting the people.
Yeah, let's dive into that more. So, how much did you internalize this doctrine as a child? Were you pretty devout and invested, or were you one of those kids who was like, I'm just going to church because I have to?
That's a good question. Earlier, like I said, you have two types of Jehovah's Witnesses. The true blue believer who really does, like you said, internalize it, really believes it and adopts it. And I hear stories from my peers where they had good times as a Jehovah's Witness, or they enjoyed it. They didn't really think anything of it. And it wasn't until they were 45 years old that they were like, oh my God, it's a cult. I was wrong. And their whole worldview is shattered. And then you have people like me who, to answer your question, I was told, I was born into this, it's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth. Okay, fine. It's the truth. It's the right thing to do. But my intuition always said something was off. So one of the things, getting a little deeper into this, one of the things you learn as a child is to keep outsiders at arm's length. So I have worldly family, and I love them and they're good people, but I'm thinking, okay, so but I can't be close to them. I can't really bond with them. Hopefully one day they become Jehovah's Witnesses. You never accept people as they are. Why can't I go to my little friend Susie's house from school? Oh, hey, Bethany, we're all having a party, birthday party. Can you come? And I can't go. So it's a very unnatural existence. You learn to keep people at arm's length. So that was strange. But to answer your question, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm going through the motions. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I go to the Kingdom Hall. I go to meetings because they don't call it church. I go to meetings. I'm doing the thing. But something felt off. And when you're a child, you can't articulate this. When you're an adult, you have enough distance that you can step back and go, oh, the red flags are so obvious. This totally makes sense. But it's insidious how everything looks so perfect and glossy, and we look pretty normal. But the things that Jehovah's Witnesses are learning in their literature, that's why I wish, instead of people just throwing out the Watchtower magazine, I wish they'd actually stop and leaf through it and read, holy crap, what? And actually read the craziness that they're spewing. Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not just church on Sunday. And that's not a slam to anybody who just goes to church on Sunday and finds spiritual fulfillment that way. I'm not judging. But Jehovah's Witnesses they are all consuming. So from birth, I went to the Kingdom Hall or meetings 3 times a week, plus preaching. So when I was growing up, it was Tuesday and Thursday night. And then, so I went to public school all day. I'm tired. I have homework. I'm exhausted. I can't have friends at school. I feel weird. I feel different. And not just like, oh, be different. It's okay. You don't have to be like everybody else. Be your own person. That's fine if you know who you are. But these were rules and a lifestyle and a religion that was imposed on me. That's why I'm different and weird. It's not because I chose to be different and weird, if that makes sense. I'm going to school. I can't be friends with my classmates. You develop this anxiety of, I'm not part of this world. So my teacher is bad. My friends at school are bad. My classmates, I can't go to their house. They're dangerous. I can't hang out with them, all that stuff. So you're dealing with that soup, that mental soup, that indoctrination as a child. And then you come home, you got your homework, and then you got to go to the meetings. For me, it was Tuesday and Thursday night. So I get home, I do homework, I'm exhausted. I just want to go to bed or watch TV like a normal kid. And instead, from 7:30 to 9:15, I was at the Kingdom Hall going through brainwashing sessions, essentially. And it's not just feel good, love Jesus, or what. And again, I don't care if that's how you worship. I'm not judging. But Jehovah's Witnesses are very systematic and structured. It's a very legalistic, structured environment. So this literature You'd have to make sure that you had highlighted answers. It's a very Q&A type of question and answer setup where they ask you rhetorical questions. All right. And the elder, some churches or whatever they call it, pastors, priests, whatever, they're called elders in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, paragraph 1. Why do we not associate with people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses? Oh, yes. Okay, you over here. Bethany, we don't associate with worldly people because they don't serve Jehovah. That's why they're bad. Oh, good job. All right, next question. So you don't actually learn or use critical thinking skills? You just learn to parrot back the rhetoric. So this gets drilled into your brain. It's almost like you see water like lapping up against a wall. Is the word eroding or corroding? I don't know, someone correct me on that, but it's like this constant, it's not, people want to hear a crazy traumatic cult story sometimes, but imagine just being systematically brainwashed from birth. So it's like I'm going to the Kingdom Hall, I'm going through the motions, I'm doing my thing, but something feels weird. This doesn't feel authentic. I'm having thoughts that are not aligning with the answers I'm supposed to be giving. So if you ask me a question, it has to match what's in the paragraph. It has to match Watchtower answers. So growing up with that, so I do that 2 nights a week. And then on Sundays, we had Sunday meeting. And then, but before that, Saturday mornings, what do you know? Knocky, knocky at the front door. Saturday mornings, I can't sleep in. I had a full week of school. I got to wake up and go out in service or preaching on Saturday mornings to strangers. And that was a bizarre experience, going to their door and telling them they're wrong and that they're going to be destroyed at Armageddon if they don't convert to being Jehovah's Witnesses. Very bizarre making kids do that. So then you feel even more isolated because you get the door slammed in your face and people threaten you. I had a older lady threaten to spray me with her hose. She was gardening. If you don't get off my lawn, just crazy stuff like that. And there's other stories. That's nothing. There's been Jehovah's Witnesses who were threatened. If you don't get off my porch, I'll shoot you, that kind of thing. So I was never happy as a Jehovah's Witness, but it felt like an obligation. Like, okay, it's the truth. I am so lucky to have been born into the one chosen group.
I know that one.
You know this. The one chosen group, so it's a heavy burden and obligation, and I think there's a mechanism that was in me that said something's off, something's wrong, and that's why there was this brewing resentment and cognitive dissonance throughout the years. Some people don't have that mechanism. Something has to kind of hit them upside the head when they're older. There's something else that hits them. They go, oh, I was a believer, but man, all of a sudden my worldview crumbled. I always knew something was off, but I couldn't articulate it as a child. And I stayed in it, did the motions, did the thing, but it was making me ill. I developed an eating disorder and started to develop some very self-destructive tendencies because I reached the conclusion that I was in fact trapped. So it wasn't some big thing. That wasn't the moment that I left. I left in my 30s. I left as an adult. But around my teenage years, it really started to sink in. Oh no, I can't just leave this. And again, I didn't even have the language to really explain how I really felt at the time because I was still young. You're a baby, even when you're a teenager. It started to get bad when I was a teenager, and then something happened in high school that really was kind of like a turning point for me.
Let's talk about the psychological damage. We've kind of covered how this cognitive dissonance can cause you to feel really uncomfortable and it doesn't sit right with you. Let's talk about some of the external things that are causing that to happen. I know one thing you wanted to talk about is this perfectionism complex and Mormon Mormonism has that too. I had that, where this constant need to feel like you're being perfect, you're the perfect saint, you're following all the rules perfectly, because if you don't, then you're not going to be saved in the end times. It's so similar to Mormonism. It's crazy, especially the whole, that's why I laughed. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at myself, because I had that same, like, how lucky am I to be born? Like, what are the odds I would be born into the right church? So, yeah, it's so similar. But some of the things that you really felt the pressure on, was it mostly the perfectionism and this need to constantly be enough?
Yeah. So tying in to answer your question, tying a little bit back to this brewing resentment or angst or this illness, because I was becoming ill. I was losing weight, and it was not because I wanted to be a model. And that's no slam. I don't want to trigger anybody who might be dealing with an eating disorder, but a lot of people know that if you're dealing with that, there's some emotional, mental component. It's not about looks, it's a control issue, or you got something else going on. You're trying to gain control.
Mhm.
So basically, I didn't feel in control of my life. But again, I didn't have the language or the words at the time. Later on, I can tell you as an adult what I thought and what clicked. But growing up as a teenager, this is what was this is the only way. It was almost like a private protest. My family could see that I was getting really thin. So what happened was, fast forward a little bit, my senior year of high school, specific experience. I remember in English class writing an essay, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the content of the essay, but I remember writing an essay. I'm a writer. I've always loved to write. And I remember it was confessional. It was basically a confessional essay. I don't remember what the topic was, but I'd made some disturbing comments in the essay. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. It was just kind of like a diary entry, like, oh, I can just talk and say whatever. So I wrote this essay, and then a day or two later, because it was like A day, B day in high school, it was like day on, day off. Like 2 days later, I'm sitting in English class, and it's quiet and we're writing, and all of a sudden an office aide came to my classroom with a pink slip and went up to my teacher, and my teacher was like, "Oh, Bethany, this is for you." And so I got up and it said, go to the counselor's office." And I was slow. I wasn't putting two and two together that I was being set up. So she sent me to the counselor's office. So I walk in, and this is to talk about perfectionism in the Jehovah's Witnesses and the feelings that I was going through. I get to the counselor's office, nice lady. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, in the burbs of Dallas, Texas. So she got like this big Texas hair, very, very warm, kind lady. And so I sit down at her desk, and still I don't understand what's happening. I don't know why I'm being called in here. I'm not putting two and two together. So I sit down and I'm like, "Hi." And she's like, "Hi, Bethany." And then she gets one of these like manila folders, these envelopes, and pulls out my essay. And I was like, oh no, like a little jolt of shame went through me of like, oh no, I said some stuff in there. What's going to happen next? Are you going to talk to my mom? What's going to happen? Oh shit, like my English teacher ratted me out or whatever. So what she did was she took my paper and she goes, "Bethany, I read your essay. It was very interesting." And she's thumbing through it. She says, "I noticed several times in here, you mentioned the word selfish. I'm selfish. I feel like I have to be perfect all the time. Selfish, selfish, selfish." And when I think about it, I had mentioned it several times. Says, "This is selfish." She says, "I don't understand really what you're talking about. Can you explain this a little bit more for me? Can you elaborate?" And Shalise, I just wrote down the most guttural, embarrassing, ugly cry from like the lowest rungs of my soul just came, just like snot and tears. And even she was just like, "Oh, honey," and she like grabbed the Kleenex box. And basically, long story short, I unloaded, and I just said, "I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm so unhappy," and I just kind of like started hyperventilating and just basically saying like, "I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I feel trapped. I have to be perfect for my parents, and I just feel like I'm under a lot of pressure. I probably didn't make any sense. It was all a blur. But and as she's listening to me, I'm like, I want to do these things with my life. I have these dreams, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, but it's selfish. It's selfish. And I just unloaded, and I didn't expect to be doing that morning when I went to English class. I didn't expect to be sent to the counselor's office and to suddenly blurt all this stuff out. So when she's listening, she's just like, "Oh, honey, oh," and she's turning around and she's getting a big red dictionary from behind her in her little swivel office chair. She's swiveling around. She gets a dictionary. She cracks it open. She's listening to me, and she flips to the word selfish. She says, "Bethany, I want you to read the definition of selfish out loud for me." I barely choked out the words. I'm like, and like handed it back to her. And then she recited or she repeated the definition. And she goes, "Bethany, everything that we've talked about in this office visit, all I've heard you say is how concerned you are with pleasing your parents, God, and your community. It doesn't sound," and she held up the dictionary, she says, "it doesn't sound like you have a complete and utter lack of consideration for other people." She goes, "It seems like you have more than enough." And that was, in my 17-year-old brain, was like, whoa. She was forcing me. That was a light bulb moment. It wasn't the moment that I woke up and left the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I will never forget that day because I thought, you're right. I'm making myself sick with worrying about making sure my parents look good. That I had a sibling. This is part of the story. I have an older sibling, and he did some things and got in trouble in the congregation. And so what happened was he got kicked out. That's another part of Jehovah's Witnesses. He got disfellowshipped as a teenager, which is excommunication. And he was shunned. And we're 10 years apart. So I was 6 years old and my brother was 16. And I remember people brutally shunning my 16-year-old brother, this young man. And I'm very sensitive. I saw what that did to my brother, who I worshiped, loved my big brother. And that always stuck with me. An unfortunate situation was he ended up getting excommunicated. It's kind of a separate story. He ended up coming back and getting reinstated, and then reinstated back into the congregation so people could talk to him and he could talk to other people, blah, blah, blah. But it really did a number on my parents' reputation and image in the congregation. And it was for some dumb offense. He smoked a cigarette or something. Things teenage boys do or whatever, that you try as a teenager. But he had they lowered the hammer on him. And I remember from a young age, I have to redeem the family image. Now, it's not like my parents verbalized this, Shalise. My parents are good people. They're not standing over me with a whip. But it's this message, this unspoken message of, he made us look really bad and caused us a lot of grief. You're our hope. You're our only hope now. Don't make us look bad. They didn't say this. They didn't verbalize this. But that was the pressure that I felt. And I'll be honest, I already had some perfectionistic tendencies and some anxious tendencies. But being, like I said in the beginning, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses absolutely exacerbates and rewards perfectionistic behavior. So instead of being accepted for who you are, or somebody saying, yo, take a chill pill, we love you no matter what, it's good, keep it up. Keep being a people pleaser. Keep smiling. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. So I had this pressure from a young age to make sure that I made my family look good, my parents look good. So, and I think I was trying to express that in that paper. That was a light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, because Jehovah's Witnesses let me interject this, Jehovah's Witnesses like to, as with any cult, I'm sure you experience this as well, it's always your fault. They always want to act like anything that you're going through, whether it's a mental health crisis or something's happening, they want to act like it exists in a vacuum. It has nothing to do with the cult. It has nothing to do with the organization. It has nothing to do with the leaders or your indoctrination. You have mental problems. You're just a perfectionist. You're just anxious. And it's like, well, even if that's true to some degree, that I have some kind of natural propensity towards it or whatever, it's not helping that you're telling me if I leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm going to be shunned. You're not going to love me. I'm not going to have the love and support of my family. So that was a turning point. All of this to say, it was a turning point. It hit me. You want to talk about cults to consciousness? It hit me. Oh my God. My parents' love is conditional. That's where this anxiety is coming from. So it's not like I was in some scary cult being branded and trafficked, which is horrible. Those things are horrible, what's happening to people in various groups. But it's just like, wow, really? That hit me. My relationship with my parents is built on a threat. And I don't want to say that out loud. This is a scary thought that's just hit me. So my counselor reached out to my mother, and my mother, to kind of wrap this story up, my mother met with the school counselor. She came to the school, and I had a moment of relief. This is me being naive, by the way. I'm thinking to myself, oh, all because of this paper. It'll all just be out in the open. Oh, thank God. I spoke to the counselor. I had a good cry. The counselor spoke to my mother. My mother's there. We're all sitting together. And my mother's a very compassionate person, but she's still indoctrinated. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh, great. She spoke to my counselor. Maybe my counselor can knock some sense into her of like, your daughter is making herself sick. She's worried that she's going to lose her family if she ever wants to leave because my counselor was saying, like, Bethany, you want to do this with your life and this with your life, and you have all these goals and dreams and ambitions. What does that have to do with it? And I was trying to explain to my counselor, like, you don't understand the number one thing to Jehovah's Witnesses. You are a Jehovah's Witness and nothing else. Your devotion and loyalty only lies with the organization. It doesn't matter what else you want in life. Not a career, not anything else. If it goes against the rules and it has nothing to do with us, it's not okay. And if you ever leave the organization, you will lose your family. So she's sitting there, the counselor and my mother are sitting there, and I was just, the naive 17-year-old was thinking like, oh, I just unloaded all this. Maybe the adults will talk amongst themselves, and maybe the counselor will knock some sense into my mother. And my mother, to her credit, I give credit where credit is due. She took me to a doctor, and, I talked about anxiety and stuff like that, but it never addressed the root. My mother never addressed the root of the problem. She kind of took me in her bosom, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, but do you love me unconditionally? I didn't say that to my mother at the time, but that was sort of the internal crisis. The perfectionism, the feeling like I'm selfish because I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, all that was kind of brewing in me and making me sick. And I felt this very strange disconnect from my mother from that point forward as I was starting to become a young adult. It was like, I was like, oh, I was almost like twitching. Like, you say you love me. You say you love me. Our home life looks fine. But what if I ever leave? Do you really love me? Or are you going to shun me?
Did your mom know that you had these feelings of not wanting to be a Jehovah's Witness?
She did know, but she always, how do I say this? I was too afraid at the time to just come out and say, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, I'm gone. Because I was so close to my mom. I was scared of what the implications were. But when I started to voice concerns, just little tidbits at that age, 17, 18, it was, oh, honey, your hormones will mess with you. It's your period. Sorry to be crass, but like stuff like that.
Man.
Yeah, like it's always, oh, honey, it's okay. I love you. Jehovah will help you. I'll help you. Let's pray together. So she always just made it look like I was just going through something. It's gaslighting. It's pure gaslighting. But also, if I'm being completely honest, Shalise, she couldn't ask those questions herself.
Yeah.
Because if she did, that opens up a whole can of worms for her. She has to question her life and her dedication to the organization, and she's going to have an identity crisis. That's just me throwing that out there. It was under a guise of compassion and love. I love you, and all this compassion and love you. But it's like, can we just cut the BS? What if I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness? Would you still love me? And actually, one day I asked her. That, and she said, of course I'll still love you, but I know you're not going to leave. That was weird. I love you, but you're not going to leave. And that was a very weird, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I am just too anxious, or maybe I'm going through depression. Maybe it is my hormones. Maybe mom's right. Okay, I'll just stick it out. Maybe I just need to study more and just get more into it, or whatever. So she found interesting manipulative gaslighting ways to kind of rope me back in. And it wasn't until I was married and gone and away from my home environment, that's a separate part of the story, but things changed in my 30s.
Yeah, well, something that I think is interesting about your mom too, that we spoke about is how she was pushing you to go to college when that's not technically allowed in Jehovah's Witnesses, almost as if she wanted you to live in a way that she couldn't herself. So let's dive into that a little bit.
I know anybody listening to this is probably it might sound confusing, because it is. There's a cognitive dissonance going on. Let me put it this way. I've said this before. I'll say it again. My parents, my mother and my father, gave me all the tools to succeed in life. They taught me to be a strong, independent woman. They told me, we want you to go to college. You're going to get a scholarship and go to college. And I did. My mother, even though she's Dutch, she grew up in Brooklyn, so she has this Brooklyn accent. She says, you're going to get a scholarship and you're going to college. You're going to get a scholarship and you're going to go to, she was just very like, about it. So I was like, okay, fine. Okay. And I got a merit-based scholarship and full free ride. So did that. And then I want you to travel. So I did. I traveled while I was single a lot, different states and countries. My parents taught me to be kind, not judge others. All these things, my parents gave me all the tools to succeed in life and then punished me for using them. So you taught me to go to an institution at the time. I mean, and let me just say this real quick. I don't have a problem with blue collar work. That's a whole other topic among Jehovah's Witnesses, that they discourage you from going to college. They can't make it a rule. They discourage you. So ex-Jehovah's Witnesses tend to kind of pedestalize higher education like it's the holy grail, when you can go to trade school, have a blue collar job, be a decent person, make a good living for yourself. So that's kind of a separate argument. But you want me to go to this institution, learn different things, different ways of life, different cultures, critical thinking, different theories, all this stuff. You want me to be a strong, independent woman. You want me to travel. You want me to think for myself, not judge other people, and kind of have this bright, like my mother basically said, go be the best person you could be. Like, I love you and support you. Okay. You gave me all these things, but yet you want me to stay a Jehovah's Witness. You want me to stay within the borders or the confines of an extremely misogynistic, narcissistic, toxic, homophobic organization. So I was raised with two value systems. And so even though you have some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who will say, like, my parents beat the living daylights out of me. They were super strict. Your parents sounded great. Yeah, they were great. And they were still indoctrinated and feeding me two value systems. So it's like, well, do you want me to be a Jehovah's Witness that sticks to this set of values? Or do you want me to spread my wings and fly
Mhm.
and go to college and do all those things? I'm confused. You're sending me conflicting information. And so finally, as an adult, when I put that into action and took a stand, they shunned me overnight. I lost my parents overnight. So that's just as much of a head screw, even though I don't have bruises on me. You want to talk about like maybe an abusive relationship or something. Well, I don't see any bruises. All looks well. But there's this emotional and mental and psychological manipulation, this emotional bondage, this gaslighting that happens. So it's like you told me to go be the best I can be and do all these, but finally when I actually did that, the indoctrination, that's what I'm trying to say for anybody listening, the indoctrination was so strong that it's conflicting. So ultimately the organization wins. Ultimately, we need to be loyal to Jehovah. Well, if I'm going to be loyal to Jehovah, that means you probably shouldn't have sent me to college. You probably shouldn't have, or not sent me to college, but like, you can't encourage me to go out in the world and be the best that I can be and spread my wings, and then also expect me to stay in a very close-minded, insular community that's hurting people.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely something that always bites people in the butt when they are encouraged to go to college and then they actually learn and expand and grow. And then their cult is like, wait. We didn't tell you to go and learn. We just told you to go and get a degree so you can make more money for us. And so it's one of those things where they don't realize that education can set you free. Education can expand your mind to a point of new perspective. And once you have new perspective, it's impossible to go back and see things the way that you used to. It's just, you can't do it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once it's out, it's like, oh, I get it now. So let's talk about those aha moments for you. I know that you ran into the bite model. That's one of the things. But let's talk about that progression of learning and expansion that got you to understand a new perspective.
Yes. So I'm going to fast forward for brevity's sake, because without getting too nitpicky from that point forward. So there was a high school aha moment, learning about conditional love, and then so I went to college, but I still about Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not. I've told people it's a mental prison. Because again, circling back around, talking about the witnesses, they don't look threatening. So it's like, oh, what were you in like some scary cult in the basement and people were whipping you? No, but like I've been indoctrinated from birth to avoid worldly people, to not look at this, to not think this is dangerous, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's Dr. Janya Lalich. I think she wrote Escaping Utopia,
Oh,
I think is
funny.
her book.
Sorry, we have an interview scheduled with her that keeps getting pushed.
Good, good.
So yeah, we're having her on soon.
Yeah, people need to hear her. She was in a cult for many years herself. She's a leading authority on the subject, and she talks about a self-sealing system. So basically, self-sealing system is I don't need the leader to be watching me. I don't need to be under surveillance by a higher up. I'll just do it myself. The guilt and the shame and the following the rules, I'll just do that myself. I don't need anybody to watch me and enforce the rules. And why I say that is that self-sealing system carried me through my 20s. Yeah, I could have been doing other things, but I had this like mental prison of like, I gotta be a good Jehovah's Witness. So I had these values, I had these ideas, these dreams, these ambitions, but I was trying to like go through the motions and still be a good Jehovah's Witness. And then met my husband in the Jehovah's Witness. He was also a Jehovah's Witness his whole life. We got married, and then we moved to North Carolina. We lived in Asheville briefly. Asheville, which got devastated by Hurricane Helene last year, but it was beautiful. We lived in Asheville briefly, then we lived in Charlotte, then we landed in Winston-Salem. So I have my Texas life with my devout parents, and, just going through the motions in my 20s. And I was just more of a creative thinker. I was a painter. I did ballet. I danced for 10 years. And, some people in the congregation, some people, give credit where credit is due. Some people thought it was cool and they were supportive. And others were like, well, now, that's time that could be spent preaching or, doing something for Jehovah. It's never enough in cults. Your whole, like they want your blood. So I was going to go crazy if I didn't feel like I had some sort of creative outlet. So it's like, I'm doing everything right, but like, you're not going to take ballet away from me or, painting or whatever. I need something because That tension that I felt with the guidance counselor and my mother at 17, 18 years old never went away. So as it stuck with me throughout all my 20s, I just shoved it down. I just suppressed it. My doubts, my concerns that I'd felt from the time I was a kid. Imagine going through your 20s, because in my mind, I'm thinking it wasn't strategic, it wasn't really conscious at the time. I'm thinking it's still the truth. I want to be clear about that. I still thought it was the truth. That's a key point. So I'm not happy. I feel ill. I'm suppressing my doubts, but I still believe it's the one true religion. I just don't like it. It's an obligation, and I'm having a hard time. So fast forward, got married around 30 years old. I had a mental breakdown. I had a nervous breakdown. For a while, I felt like I was going insane. I was a happy, healthy kid. I didn't particularly I had some anxiety, propensity towards anxiety, just having that kind of creative, like kooky spirit or whatever. But I didn't have any kind of like major depressive disorder. There wasn't anything else going on. So why would an otherwise normal, happy, healthy child grow up to feel like they're going insane and want to jump off a bridge to find relief? Where you start to have like suicidal ideation and you want to waste away. You're having some very disturbing thoughts, self-destructive thoughts. Finally, I had a nervous breakdown and to catch people up, I couldn't go back to the Kingdom Hall. So mind you, I still think it's, quote, the truth. But imagine from birth up until 30 years old, I feel I'm finally like the kettle is brewing. The frog in the pot analogy. I've been cooking for 30 years. Finally, I snapped, and it was such a blur. I said, I cannot go. So what happened was, I remember the day I was sitting in the Kingdom Hall during the Sunday meeting. My husband is sitting next to me, and the speaker, he was in the Jehovah's Witnesses, there is a special speaker that comes around called the circuit overseer. So he's like he's the head honcho that comes and checks on all the congregations quarterly. And he's the circuit overseer is coming to give a talk. They don't call them sermons or anything, they call them talks. So the circuit overseer was in town, and I'm sitting in the Kingdom Hall and I'm thinking, I feel like crap. I don't want to be here, but it's the truth. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I just feel like a robot. I feel like a zombie. Let me put it that way. I feel like a zombie. And the speaker, the circuit overseer, got up on the stage, and he's going through a spiel, and we're about 15 minutes into his talk. He says, "Friends," looks out from the podium, "it's come to our attention that a lot of the friends in the organization are suffering from depression. Isn't that sad?" And it just like in my head, like I just feel like I just like feel my blood pressure rising. They're suffering from depression. I'm thinking, yeah, no shit. There's something. Is it just me? Am I the only one? Because when you're in a cult, it doesn't matter if it's the Jehovah's Witnesses. You're like, am I the only one who has doubts? Am I the only one who's like thinks there's something off here? So I'm listening to him give his talk. He says, they're suffering from depression. How sad is that? But let's turn in our Bibles to, and I know that there's somebody that's going to be watching this who knows what scripture I'm talking about. I'm forgetting it at the moment. I want to say it's Proverbs. But he says, let's open up to Proverbs, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And I flip over and you hear the Kingdom Hall. Everybody in the Kingdom Hall is silent, and you hear the little wispy fluttering of pages in their Bible. It says, the one isolating himself is seeking his own selfish advantage. It was like I had an out-of-body experience. I floated out of my chair. I felt like I levitated. I know I didn't, but it felt like it. I'm not doing this anymore. flew out of the Kingdom Hall. I don't even remember how I got home. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in a Kingdom Hall. Because I had heard that word selfish. The word I had been told my whole life I am a selfish, imperfect, not good enough POS. And now I have depression and anxiety, and I'm going through a mental health crisis, and I'm withering away, and you're telling me, don't stay home and think I should take care of myself. You should be right here in the center of Jehovah's organization. I'm thinking, that was the moment that I went, Jehovah's organization is making me sick. This is it. I can no longer ignore it. I cannot ignore it. This is making me crazy. This is the problem.
It's interesting you mentioned this is what's making me sick. We had another guest who said the same thing about just mainstream Mormonism. She said, everything changed the moment I realized what I thought was the cure was actually the poison.
She put it far more articulately. No, dude, yes, exactly. This is the thing that's making me sick. Oh my God, I am not spending another second in this building. This building, this religion, this organization stole my life, and I'm reclaiming it. I floated out of that seat. My ass ran home, and that was it. Never stepped foot in a Kingdom Hall ever again. That was in 2016. That was in 2016 or 2017, a little fuzzy on the timeline, but never went back. And it wasn't strategic. I didn't know what I was going to do next. All I knew was I felt like Congresswoman Maxine Waters reclaiming my time. Like, it was just like reclaiming my time. I'm reclaiming my time. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I need to get out of this environment. I'm not going back. I blocked people, turned off my phone. I didn't completely stop talking to my parents, but I stopped reaching out to them. I mean, I talked to them, but it wasn't like, hey mom, hey pop, like every day, like everything's fine. It was like, I need a break from everyone and everything I know right now because I have some decisions to make. I became a hermit for a few weeks, and with Jehovah's Witnesses, as with any cult, people come looking for you. So my husband, John, was very supportive. And he's like, that's fine. Just go rest, go sleep, go do whatever you got to do. We're not going, no. It's okay. It's okay, babe. We're not going back. We're not going back. We're going to take a break. To be clear, we didn't know what we were going to do next. But he says, your health, your mental health is more important. It's like one step at a time. So during this time, I'm having this nervous breakdown. I start fading. So any ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this, fading in the Jehovah's Witnesses means you stop knocking on doors, you stop all the Jehovah's Witness activities. So you stop going to meetings. So you stop going, I stopped going to meetings, I stopped preaching. So obviously when you do this constantly week in, week out your whole life, people are going to notice when you stop doing that. So thankfully, I just so happened to be in the position that I was not at my hometown in Dallas, Texas. That would have been really bad. It was still kind of building a life in North Carolina, but still people noticed that we were gone and we're starting to be like, hey, where you been? To kind of like drag you back in. So I was like, no way, turn off your phone, no texts, no calls. Like we got to lock down and I got to get away from all this. Then one evening, Shalise, on a sheer hunch, is it a hunch or was it something cosmic or the universe sent it down to me? I don't know, but I'm glad it happened. I thought of the bite model because I'd heard about it in a documentary about another cult, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't a cult, but, I was watching stuff about other cults, right? So I Googled it. I opened my laptop and I Googled the bite model. And that was the moment that everything officially changed. The bite model, for anybody who's not familiar with it, or I'm sure you've had guests that have talked about the bite model before, just as a refresher, it was developed by Stephen Hassan, who is a cult expert in the US. He wrote Combating Cult Mind Control. And the bite model stands for behavioral, information, thought, and emotion control. And so there's these 4 quadrants. And in each quadrant, there's all these bullet points. So if the group that you're a part of, whether it's a religious group, political, self-help, or whatever it is, if the group that you're a part of is demonstrating these qualities, trying to control your behavior, if they're controlling the flow of information, if they're practicing thought crime, you can only think and feel a certain way, emotional, these emotional bullet points. If they're hitting these bullet points, you're probably in a cult. And the Jehovah's Witnesses hit every single bullet point short of murder. And even that I wouldn't put past a Jehovah's Witness to murder someone. But out of 100-something bullet points, the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm speechless. Because in the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you leave and you speak out against the organization, you're called an apostate. And different denominations interpret that term differently. But in the Jehovah's Witnesses, it means somebody who was once a Jehovah's Witness and they leave and they speak out. So I'm an evil apostate through their lens. You're always told to beware of apostates. They're lurking on the internet. They have podcasts. Watch out for them on social media and their books and stuff at bookstores. So don't listen to apostates. This was not an apostate. This was objective criteria. Objective criteria. This guy has no skin in the game. He's just a cult expert. That was what I needed. I needed to know that I wasn't just being emotionally swayed by somebody who was angry and bitter on the internet, even though now I know that even if they are angry and bitter, it's completely justified. But, most apostates, they're just speaking truth. But at the time, I'm thinking, I don't want this to be like apostate literature that I'm looking at. This was just objective criteria saying that the Jehovah's Witnesses were, in fact, a cult. So that blew my mind. Everything changed from there. There was one more thing that I discovered. So officially I stopped, that was it. I'm part of a cult. It confirmed my suspicions. Because like I said, you have the true blue believer who believes it their entire life. They believe the doctrine. All of it to me kind of just felt like magical thinking, kind of weird, goofy. I didn't really buy it. I just thought okay, it's the truth. It's, where am I to go to, Lord? You have the answers. This is what people need. Okay, I'll do it. But I didn't really fully in my gut buy in. Something felt off. And so reading the Bite model confirmed my suspicions. And then I found the Australian Royal Commission. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, the Australian Royal Commission found 1,006 cases of child sexual abuse in Australia alone among the Jehovah's Witnesses that were never reported to law enforcement. I was disgusted, shocked, and growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, we railed against the Catholic Church. The Catholics their mishandling of child sexual abuse. It's abhorrent. And I thought, you raging freaking hypocrites. Not only did I find the Australian Royal Commission, but then I fell down the rabbit hole and discovered that the Jehovah's Witnesses, for decades, have had a massive, chronic, systemic child abuse problem to where they have amassed a database of tens of thousands of child predators and just offenders in general that were never reported to law enforcement for over 50 years.
What's the Jehovah's Witness reason to not report these predators?
So Jehovah's Witnesses operate off something called the two-witness rule. So again, I know somebody out there is going to know all the scriptures. I think it's Deuteronomy. There's a scripture in Luke. They abuse scriptures that say you need 2 or more witnesses to substantiate a claim. And they misapply that and abuse that scripture in regards to child abuse. Is an abuser going to have an audience to what they're doing? Of course not. You have a child. They're terrified to say something. When they finally do confess, they've recently legally had to make some changes, but for decades, this is part of the secret culture no one knows about. For decades, that child, let's say it's a 9-year-old girl, abused by a 35-year-old, that 9-year-old girl would be called before, I haven't even touched on Jehovah's Witnesses judicial committees. That child would be called into a back room at the Kingdom Hall before a tribunal of 3 older men and be asked graphic questions about the experience, her body, did she enjoy it?
Oh,
Vile questions. What were you wearing? What did you do? And then that child would be required to face their abuser. So that 35-year-old would be called into the room. And this child doesn't have the support, is not allowed the support of a parent or another woman in the room. So you have a little girl with 3 older men, and she is being forced to confront her and extract a confession. Absolutely vile practice. Re-traumatizing the child. And this happened to countless children. Extremely abusive system. And so they count on the 2-witness rule, and then they count on a culture of silence, shame, and humiliation. So then what would happen, not only were the parents shamed, don't go to the police. It's going to make the organization look bad. It's going to bring reproach on Jehovah's name. They're more interested in their image and their assets. Don't go to the police. We'll deal with it. If the parents were brainwashed enough, they would just comply. But if the parents said, oh, hell no, I'm going to protect my child, I'm going to go to law enforcement, the victim and her family, or his family, if it was a young boy, the victim and their family would then be threatened with shunning and being ostracized from other people in the congregation for making the elders and the congregation and the organization look bad, for bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. Barbara Anderson, I want to give a shout out here. Barbara Anderson, she is the OG whistleblower who blew the lid off this whole CSA cover-up. She did a Dateline special actually in 2000 or 2001. I actually watched it at the time when I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was probably, I don't remember, 5th or 6th grade. And I remember watching it thinking, oh no, an apostate's on TV. But we all sat down and watched her on Dateline. And then recently I actually had the privilege of, or the honor of, meeting Barbara and speaking to her and telling her how much her bravery meant to me. Barbara Anderson worked at headquarters in Brooklyn, and she worked in the writing department, and she was receiving all of these blue envelopes, Shalise. So what happened was the governing body in the early 90s sent out a letter. Remember, the governing body, just as a refresher, used to be comprised of 8 men. Now it's like 12. They've added members. This is the centralized leadership of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They make the rules. They sent out a letter, I think it was in 1991 or 1992, a letter to all congregations all over the world, to elders, okay? The pastors or the priests of the congregation sent out a letter to the elders and said, if an accusation of child abuse comes up, you detail it on this form, put it in a blue envelope, and send it to us. We'll take care of it. Barbara Anderson said she saw thousands of blue envelopes from Jehovah's Witness congregations flowing in to the mailroom. And she thought, WTF? What the hell? What is this? I don't need to rehash the whole story here. It's all documented actually on her website if anybody wants more information about the blue envelopes and Barbara Anderson instigating major change in that regard and raising awareness to the CSA cover-up on her website. You can Google her. She details the entire story. Finding this out, that was the final straw. And that was when I was firm and resolute and decided to disassociate from the Jehovah's Witnesses. I cannot align myself with this organization. So it's not just about me feeling shitty anymore. That's bad enough. I was already ill. This is making me sick.
Yeah.
But that was it. I knew that I would never see my parents again. But that was, I might have faded. I might have continued to just fade, kind of still be tethered to it and still kind of play the game. But at that point, I said, I cannot align myself with this organization anymore. And so my husband and I sent in our official letters of disassociation. And I don't mean in psychological terms, dissociation, but disassociation, meaning we're not going to associate ourselves with the organization anymore. So we wrote formal letters, just a brief sentence, take us off your roster. We no longer want to be identified as Jehovah's Witnesses. Signed on the dotted line. Put that in New Year's Eve 2017. We rang in 2018 free. And I paid a heavy price. Lost my parents overnight.
What's so heartbreaking to me is that you would lose your parents over finding out the horrific things that their church is doing. It's so backwards. You would think that if they understood what was really going on, you would hope that they would feel the same way. But instead, you're losing a great relationship with your parents because of this horrible cover up.
There's nothing you can say. It is steel trap. Jehovah's Witnesses are not a harmless, quirky, goofy looking, nice religious group. They are they are prepared. If you hand them the Kool-Aid, they will drink it. I went to my parents and I explained, look, you got to be kidding. My father has been an elder since 1972. I said, Pop, how could you knew about this. You were around. My father's been an elder forever. You knew about this. There's a wave that comes over you of like, who are my parents? Like, I know you're good people, but how can you justify staying with this and holding on and just that tight grip? And it's because their whole identity is wrapped up in being a Jehovah's Witness. They don't know who they are without that.
Yeah.
People underestimate that. Your entire identity, it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? You know, my parents are in their 70s. If they wake up now, what are they their brain's gonna explode. So I can't speak for them. I can't put words in their mouth, but I can only imagine there's a level of denial, or we love you, but we have to do this because if I leave, then I'm gonna have to think of all my life choices, and it's gonna be confusing and crazy for me. Because I think there's a misconception with what I do. Like, oh, she just has an axe to grind. Bethany, stop the shunning. She's getting onto the internet and just bitching. She has some crusade against her family or her parents. No, I love my parents. That's why I'm pissed. The organization's arbitrary shunning rule took my family from me. Shalise, if you want to shun me because you truly believe that I'm a danger, I truly offend your conscience. I truly bother you. I go against your values. I'm really offensive to you, and that's why you want to cut me off or shun me. I can respect that. But knowing my parents are shunning me because the governing body is dictating that they do, and that they're trapped, and that they're not allowed to use their critical thinking skills, that's what I have a problem with. The mandated shunning. People who are speaking up, CSA survivors, they're the victims. And they're being silenced by their devout Jehovah's Witness parents and the congregation. They were the ones that were victimized. So this mandated shunning is what I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with people having their sets of values and boundaries. It's when a group of men is dictating your life and how you should think, and you're not allowed to use your own mind. That's where we have a problem. We've crossed into cult territory.
Yeah. In the episode we just did with Owen, he said that they recently changed a rule, which is honestly laughable, and I'm sure you've heard it, where they're like, well, okay, maybe not complete shunning. If they're in a kingdom hall, you're allowed to say hello. Like, wow, so progressive. You're allowed to say hello if they come to the meeting hall, the kingdom hall.
Exactly.
Okay, so like if they're trying to get back into the organization, then we will say hello.
Yes.
No other words. You can greet them, and that's your allowance.
Yes. So to briefly touch on this, because I didn't touch on this earlier, Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm sure a lot of people know this by now, but they have an internal court system or judicial system. So if they deem you guilty of a spiritual crime, they will excommunicate you or disfellowship you, and then you are shunned. And so he's absolutely right. So there's this new change, but Shalise, it's putting lipstick on a pig. It's a game of semantics. So Now, you gotta think. People need to understand the culture of the organization. So now, let's say I got disfellowshipped. I disassociated, but let's say I got disfellowshipped. I could walk into a kingdom hall right now, and someone can say, "Oh, hi, Bethany," and that's it. You're allowed to give, in their words, a brief greeting.
So kind.
Yeah, and it is. Oh, thank you. I don't need your brief greeting. Where have you People were getting phone calls, Shalise. Their parents, they haven't spoken to their parents in 20 years, and getting calls from their mother. "Oh, I can finally say hi to you, and I just wanna tell you I love you." Where have you been? "Yeah, I love you too, mom, but where have you been for 20 years?" I had to move on with my life and function, and it's really, yeah, it's really sick. It's laughable, but it's also sick. And yes, that would mean, to be clear, to clarify, that would be somebody who's trying to come back and be reinstated into the congregation. That's why they're there at the meetings. They're trying to show penance, trying to show remorse, and trying to work their way back into the good graces of the elders and get reinstated. It's just, people are not, they're just not thinking. They're just not, this isn't like, use your brain. Like, if I'm allowed to say a 15-second greeting to somebody, why can't I have a 15-minute conversation? Why are we micromanaging people's conscience?
Yeah, that's behavior control.
It's behavior control. I don't have a problem with Jehovah's Witnesses believing in paradise and panda bears and, everybody smiling and happy and equality and no more suffering and pain. Those are all objectively wonderful things. But what is happening within the walls of the Kingdom Hall? What is the culture of the organization? How are people treating each other? Save it. I don't need your paradise. If paradise means being with you people, I'm good. Don't need it.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with these groups that are a little bit more innocuous under the radar, I think it's important to look at not necessarily the doctrine or the theology itself, but the symptoms, the patterns of
Yes.
manipulation because of the doctrine. And that's where a lot of people too get into semantics, like with Mormonism especially, they're like, everything's great. It's about loving each other and it's about forever families. I'm like, okay, but let's look at what that also means. The deeper conversation of if this is true, then this has to be true, right? So if it's true that if you're a good Mormon and you follow all the rules and you get to be with your family forever in heaven, that also means that if you drink coffee or have a beer with your husband or whatever, that you will not see your family forever in the afterlife, which is eternal torment. So like we have to look at both sides of the coin. We have to look at the fruits of the doctrine itself. We have to look at the cause and effect of how this is actually being implemented and how it's actually affecting people in the long term, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. All of it just gets wrapped up in this ball of chaos that becomes a mental breakdown, that becomes someone's psyche, that becomes the brainwashing, that has to be broken down and unwoven and torn apart and figured out before you can find peace again. And before you can find actual peace within yourself without the self-policing that you mentioned. You said Dr. Janja calls it what did you call it?
A self-sealing system.
Self-sealing system. I call it self-policing, where you do all of the work for them. And all of that has to be broken down before you can truly feel like you are in charge of yourself. You are in charge of your own sovereignty. And so, yeah, all of that is so important to talk about. And it's so difficult for you to see it until you're out. You really have to pull yourself out of that environment and out of that mentality, out of that space to be able to find a new perspective. And maybe that even means just listening to someone else's experience before you can recognize it within your own experience. But yes, all of that is so important. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing. And we're almost out of time. So we need to hear about how you're doing now, how you are using your YouTube platform, if it's a healing process for you, if it's because you just want to get the word out. What makes you happy and brings you peace?
Oh my gosh, so many things do. I mean, I'm so grateful for my freedom now. But as far as specifically the YouTube channel, I just got good and pissed. I just got good and pissed. I wish there was a more professional answer. I I mean, really, I remember how I felt at 6 years old watching my 16-year-old brother, a young man, be brutally shunned. I saw what that did to his psyche and how that affected him as a man as he got older. And I am just absolutely 100% against the culture of silence that the Watchtower, that the Jehovah's Witnesses have established over the generations. That's why so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses get on YouTube and write their comments, and you see their stories are like a novel in the comments. They need to get it out. They need validation. They need to know that they're not going crazy. They need to know that somebody understands, because Watchtower has so successfully shut people down and silenced people over the years that I said, oh, hell no. I'm going to say something. I'm speaking up. This is not about, you have to understand, Shalise, this isn't about revenge or vindication or against my parents. This is just screwed up. This is inhumane. And people need to know about it. So I'm just trying to raise awareness and shout it from the rooftops along with my other XJW activists and friends. Just raise awareness about it. It's inhumane, the mandated shunning.
Yeah.
And the other harmful policies. I'm just against the silence, you know? My parents, if they called me tomorrow and they woke up to water under the bridge, I love you and I'm just happy to have you back. That's it. Doing great, writing my next book, or in the middle of writing my next book. It's called Burning Down the House, Coping with Toxic Family Dynamics, Estrangement, and Rebuilding Your Life. So I'm trying to destigmatize estrangement using my story throughout the book, but also using other examples where people may be coming from extreme circumstances of having to suppress who they are and hide who they are forever just to please their family. So even if you took this out of the context of religion, maybe you know you're a people pleaser and you're trying to please mom and dad or please whoever in your family above all else. But what if your family is making you sick? What if your family is toxic? What if your family is built on conditional love? So, I mean, my experience is not universal as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but there are people who feel a strong tug and obligation and duty, moral duty to their family. But it's like, where's the line? Okay, we have differences, especially right now in our political climate. You see this with families having very different beliefs on the political spectrum. How can we come together and reach mutual respect and possibly compromise for the sake of the relationship? Is that possible? Are both people willing to show each other dignity and respect and love? Or do you have to do what you have to do to preserve your sanity and your mental and emotional well-being? So that's the general outline and message of the book. You know, living a life that's personally resonant, letting people live theirs, but doing what you got to do despite the cost.
Yes, that's a good Linda Listen. Doing what you got to do despite the cost. Do you have a different Linda Listen in mind?
I would say this as a final thought. Linda Listen, in the Jehovah's Witness camp, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but stop deluding yourself. It's difficult, but your family, your relationship with your family is built on a threat. So if you're a current Jehovah's Witness, or you're questioning, or you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, I'm not saying your parents are evil. I'm not making some sweeping generalization, but I am saying they are brainwashed. They are brainwashed. And what are you willing to put up with? What do you want your future to be? Do you want to shrink forever and be something you're not, just to please mom and dad and to make sure other people are comfortable? So your relationship is built on a threat. It's a stone cold, hard fact that you're going to have to wrap your brain around because you deserve better. That's my Linda Listen. You deserve better.
That's great. Thanks so much, Bethany, for coming on and sharing and for what you do on your channel.
Thank you, Shalise. Thank you for having these very healing conversations. You're doing really good work. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other final thoughts before we go? Well, let's tell everyone how we can find you. How can people support you and find you?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is called Stop the Shunning. I have my website, bethanyleger.com. And I also wrote a book called Physically In, Mentally Out, Navigating Your Exit from Watchtower, which is available on Amazon. But yeah, I post content weekly. trying to help former and current Jehovah's Witnesses kind of just work through the nuts and bolts of what they're dealing with, kind of like a recovery process. I'm not a therapist. Let me be clear about that. But try to use humor and just understand. I know what you're going through. I was once in your position, and it's not going to be easy rebuilding your life, but you can rebuild your life. And like I said, you deserve it.
Amazing. Any other final thoughts?
Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult.
In case they missed it.
Did I mention Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult?
Oh, now we know.
Okay, just checking.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. The best way to support the channel, the podcast, and the guests is to engage with this video. Liking, commenting, leaving those words of encouragement means so much to our guests who are bravely coming on and sharing their stories. And if you want to support further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults to consciousness. If you want to go to Mexico with us, we're going at the end of October. As of this recording, we have one spot left at a discounted rate. So grab it while you still can. And if you like this video, I'll link 2 more down here below. We have an incredible playlist with other Jehovah's Witnesses videos. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.